David Holmes walked out of the public defender's office with nothing but a laptop and a cell phone. 16 months later, his firm has 150 clients, a full team, and $0 in debt. All right, we're here with David Holmes and excited to talk with David about launching his law firm here recently in the last couple of years. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks, Darren. I appreciate you having me on.
All right. And welcome you, the listener, back to the Lawyer Millionaire podcast. I'm your host, Darren Wirtz. All right, David. So take us back to late 2024. You'd been a public defender. What was the moment or conversation that made you realize it was time to hang your own shingle?
Yeah, so I think one of the big motivating factors was when I joined the public defender's office back in 2022. We had 8 full-time attorneys. Our caseloads were manageable by public defender standards. They were anywhere from around 150 to 175. And in December of 24, we had 3 attorneys, and my caseload was hovering around probably 300 at all times. And I just kind of
Wow.
looking at myself, and I was just asking, I kept asking, what am I still doing here? Why am I still here doing the same thing with twice the caseload and none of the benefits? And I had some really fantastic mentors along the way, and I decided that, if not now, when? And so once I kind of had established that and realized that, I felt comfortable enough with my skill set to go out on my own, it was just a matter of taking the leap, and that's what I did. And it was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Congratulations. And we're going to talk all about this, but you've had some incredible success and incredible growth very quickly, which I want to learn all about. Let's talk about those early days. You launched your business, as I understand it, in January of 2025. In those first 90 days, what surprised you the most?
I think what surprised me was the business aspect of things and how I could utilize technology to fulfill the roles that I had lost out on in being at a public defender job. As a public defender, I had an assistant that did all my drafting for me, all my filings. And so when I went out on my own, it was just me, a laptop, and a cell phone. And so utilizing technology was one of the things that surprised me the most about being able to improve my efficiency and, keep my overhead low and sort of do things at the lowest expense possible, but still maintaining high standards. And so that was one of the things that I really try to utilize because obviously starting something from the ground up takes a lot of time. And I didn't want to take out any loans or anything like that to, hire a big staff or invest a lot of money at the beginning. So I really just tried to lean on technology as much as I could.
Good for you. I mean, that is one of the lessons I wish every law firm owner starting out would learn is you don't have to take on a whole bunch of debt. We want to be, and you can be profitable from day one. We want to really guard that profitability from the get-go. So that's a great way to think about it. I understand that your background is in philosophy. You have a bachelor's in philosophy. I'm curious, has that background helped you in any unexpected ways as a new business owner?
I think the way that it's benefited me the most is being able to be flexible with the way that I approach being a business owner. I'm very open to learning. Obviously, before starting my own business, I had zero experience in running a business. I went straight from high school to college to law school. And so being a public defender was really my first true job. And so after that, I think in starting my business and being able to be flexible and sort of have that critical thinking really actually served me well because I was open to learning from anyone and everyone that had suggestions. I was on Reddit, I was joining, law firm boot camps. And so I think the sort of philosophy background really just helped me sort of realize that it's okay to not be an expert right away and that you need to learn from other people if you want to be successful.
Awesome. I love that. And let's talk about that growth story. What does the firm, in the time since you opened, what does the firm look like today in terms of client volume and your staff, your team? Tell us what it looks like.
Yeah, so currently we have about 150 active clients. As I said, I started from just a cell phone and a laptop, and now we have a 2,000 square foot office. I have a partner attorney who's my business partner, and then I have a full time dedicated legal assistant and a full dedicated secretary. And we actually just brought on a contract investigator for some of our larger criminal cases. So in the past, 16 months or so, we have expanded rapidly.
That's awesome. Hiring and bringing on staff is one of the most challenging steps for many new law firm owners. What helped you take those steps and have the courage to bring people on?
I think what led to me having the courage to bring people on was realizing my own limitations. When I realized that I couldn't be the lawyer, the business owner, the filer, the court runner, all of those things at the same time, I knew that it was time to bring other people on. And when I did that, it definitely decreased the stress and sort of allowed things to run more fluently. And I've always said, if I need to hire more people and I'm not getting paid as much, that's okay, because eventually that day will come where the profitability will increase. But if I can get a solid system and the right people in the right positions, then that's what I aim for at the beginning, really.
Right people in the right positions. You're speaking my language. Straight from EOS, right people, right seats. We talk about that and having the right people on the bus and the right people in the seats on the bus. That's a really critical concept. You've gotten a great case volume going and has some great financial results in just these last couple of years. What do you credit that to in your marketing? What's been working really successfully for you?
I think outsourcing my marketing was the single smartest thing I've done since opening the firm. When I hired an outside agency to run that, I hired a really good team that was vetted. And we have fantastic communication. They're wonderful people. And they really take care of everything on the back end so that I can focus on being the attorney. As we talked about a little bit earlier, I don't pretend to be an expert in all things, and marketing is definitely one of the ones that I know about zero. So I pay them to handle it for me, and we have a great working relationship. And that was definitely one of the things that contributed to the growth early on. Absolutely.
And who is that marketing team, if you don't mind me asking? I'm sure a lot of listeners would be curious to know who they are.
Absolutely. So they're a Green Cardigan Marketing out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, run by Ashley Robinson, who is fantastic. And I've been with them since March of 24 or 25, excuse me. And they have been nothing but fantastic.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. And bringing in the leads is step one. The then critical step is how do we make sure we're converting those leads and creating happy customers. What do you do that's been successful in that step?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, having an excellent CRM, I think, is step one, and Clio Grow has been fantastic for that, so that we can track everything, track our average case value, how many cases we're bringing in a month, what our lead potential is. But then after that is really just making sure that we have a system in place so that once someone calls, they get someone immediately, and they get someone who knows what they're talking about, who knows how to handle a sale, and who make sure that that client is taken care of. So one of the things that I think we do differently is that the way our phones are actually set up is that at all times, whenever somebody calls the marketing line, every single one of our phones will ring. So we actually have 100% call pickup for the last 14 months, and I think that's contributed hugely to our success.
Okay, great. Yeah, that is a common factor we see in successful firms is being fast to get on the phone with that new potential client. You mentioned sales. I'm glad you mentioned that. What many new law firm owners tend to be uncomfortable with is the idea that they are salespeople now, and they have to learn sales skills. Were you a natural at sales, or what did you? How did you become a good salesperson?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because obviously being a public defender for so long, I never had to ask a client for money. I was paid. When
Yeah.
I first had to start doing it, it felt pretty unnatural. But I think when I got the hang of it, I became a natural. I love talking to people. Criminal defense is very communication oriented. And so once I really kind of got down what my value was and determined, how I could present that to clients, I think it became second nature. And now rather than it being, something that I am scared of, I actually look forward to it.
That's great. Yeah. Was there any training that you did for sales, or you just kind of learned by experience?
I definitely learned by experience, but I definitely am a practitioner of Chris Voss's method. I read in my spare time, and so I'm familiar with the Black Swan Group and his negotiation books, and so I've kind of picked up some tidbits from those as well.
Okay, okay. Very cool. Um, what do you what are some of the common objections that you face and how you've learned to deal with those?
I think one of the most common objections is one, price, but two is, why do I even need an attorney?
Mm,
The way that,
mm,
I always go through those is, well, you're paying us not only for our time, but you're paying us for our expertise. And if you want something done right, then it's going to cost, it's going to cost you. But it's going to be worth it in the end. And we make sure to let people know that we're very client focused. We're very client centered. We're not one of those firms that when you call them, you just get an assistant every time. I try to be as available as possible. And then two, when it comes to the objection of do I even need an attorney, I say, well, it's like doing, if you want your best friend to do heart surgery on you, that's fine, but don't expect it. And it's unfortunate because I've had a lot of clients that have called me after pleading guilty without an attorney, and
mm.
looking at $30,000, $40,000 in restitution. And at that point, there's nothing I can do other than say, well, you should have called me 3 months ago. And that gives me some heartburn because I do this because I enjoy helping people. And so, when they can pay an attorney, a $5,000 or $6,000 flat fee versus pay $40,000 in restitution, then it will kind of sink in as to why, our services are valuable.
Yeah, that definitely paints a good picture there. Um, some criminal defense firms we've worked with struggle with collections and billing and getting clients to pay and end up having a very large AR, accounts receivable. How are you staying on top of client payments and making sure clients pay and that and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've pivoted a lot the last 6 months since we've expanded. Obviously, when I first started, I was pretty much taking anything that walked through the door who could make a down payment, just to grow the business. But now that we're more successful and more profitable, we're a lot more, um, for lack of better phrasing, picky about clients that we take on, and we make
Yeah.
sure that we at least get half down on a flat fee. But one of the resources that we've used is LawPay. And LawPay has been very helpful for people who, they might not be able to afford a $10,000 flat fee, but, if they can break it out into monthly installments where we get paid right away, that's been really helpful for a lot of my clients. And then just making sure that we send out automated bills. But I definitely have that same, struggle as well as I'm sure, like you said, many criminal defense firms do.
Yeah. And you're located in Gillette, Wyoming, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Which is not a very dense urban market, which maybe that's part of your secret to success is you're in kind of a market where you can really become a well-known name easily. Do you feel like that's the case for you?
Absolutely. I think a lot of my success is attributed to sort of the first movers advantage, if you will. And, being one of the first, I wouldn't say the first, but maybe one of the most involved with marketing, SEO, and PPC and LSA and getting Green Cardigan on. I think we've had a massive first movers advantage in getting our name out there. And I think that's helped quite a bit. And then once, the clients see what we're about and they get into our office and they see the results that we drive, that obviously goes into our, our reviews and our Google business profile. And then people start to see, not only are they marketing successfully, but their clients are extremely happy with the services that they're getting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We talked a little bit about the cash flow. Let's come back to that a little bit. Have there been any moments in the firm where cash flow was a little bit tight, and what did you learn from those experiences?
Yeah, so I brought my business partner on, Jacob Stewart. He's the other attorney in our office. I brought him in July of 25. We were best friends in law school, and it was always our dream to do this. And that first month that he came on, I think we actually lost 20 to $40,000. Uh, Walking by the street of the courthouse, and I thought, did I just make my best friend go lose a job and then join a failing firm? Like, did I? And there was a serious gut check moment there for about 2 weeks where I was like, did I make the wrong choice? My uh,
Hmm.
at a very successful large civil law firm in South Dakota, and they loved him. And I was like, did I really just ruin my friend's legal career by joining a failing law firm? But thankfully, things picked up after that. It was more, I think it was more of a patience thing, and obviously
Yeah.
the additional expense of another attorney. But thankfully, things kept going along the path that they were soon after that sort of dip had occurred. But it did definitely scare me for a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. That's common. There's a catch up period. When we talked before, I mentioned the idea of profit first, which I think was new to you. Have you had a chance to explore that at all?
I have a little bit. Yeah, I've read a few articles on it, and it definitely seems like an interesting concept that I like it.
Yeah, we've been talking about that a lot this year. And for our listeners, you can go back and you can check out some of our previous episodes. Basic idea is subdividing all the money that comes in into different sub accounts for different purposes. It really helps reduce a lot of that cash flow stress because then you can look and you can see, oh, I have money for this, for that, and for that in those accounts ready to go, which
Mhm.
can be very helpful.
Right, absolutely.
Absolutely. Is that, one of the things you mentioned too was, the stress of being an attorney is one thing, but the stress of running a business is completely different. A lot of that probably relates to cash flow. Tell us a little bit more about how you experience that and what that means for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest stressors of running a business is not only being profitable, but understanding that having an obligation to pay other people's salaries is a huge responsibility, and it's not something
Mm,
to take lightly. If I don't make money, my employees don't get paid, and if they don't get paid, then they can't feed their families. So that's
yep.
something that I sort of take a deep philosophical approach to. And so when I look at, profitability and the business side of things, I always try to make sure that every dollar is going to a place that's going to make us successful, if not now, then 3 months down the line. Obviously, there are lagging effects of marketing that, those things take time and those things take patience. But I always like to make sure that, every dollar we spend is going in a place that's going to make us successful long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, David. I think, that for me as a business owner, that is one of the greatest privileges and also one of the greatest challenges. You know, I have employees that need to get paid. It's a privilege, the way I think about it, from the standpoint that I love being able to create a place where they can come work and do what they love. I think that for me is just so profound and so wonderful.
Absolutely.
It's also a great responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that I can, do my best to create an environment where my employees love showing up every day. They love doing the work that they do. But as you said, it's also the fact of I have to make sure that not only do they enjoy what they do, but that they're getting paid for it. And so it's definitely something that I make sure to take very seriously because I would rather not pay myself than not pay them. That's kind of how I look at it as a business owner because at the end of the day, if we're not successful, I view that as my responsibility. And so I always like to make sure that they're taken care of.
Absolutely. In your marketing efforts, where do referrals fit into the equation? Do you get a lot of business from referrals, either from other attorneys or previous clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's one of the benefits of having been a public defender so long is I was used to being in court 5 to 6 times every day. So I got very familiar with law enforcement around town, the civil attorneys, court staff, court security. And we get a lot of referrals from people that are involved in the court system simply because they know who I am and they know the quality of work that our firm produces. And so I think
Yeah.
a huge thing is word of mouth, especially like you said, in a more rural blue collar community that
Hmm.
trusting of word of mouth. That's a huge thing for our business.
What mix of new business would you say, what percentage is referrals and word of mouth versus digital?
I would say it's probably 60 to 70% digital and then 30 to 40% word of mouth.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's kind of what we see pretty often. I imagine that I think you'll see this. Your referrals will continue to be a pretty significant portion of your new client mix for sure. That's pretty natural. Great. Well, David, where do you see the firm 5 years from now? Where are you trying to go with all this? As you grow, you will eventually become the bottleneck. What does the long-term vision look like?
I think the long term vision looks like probably not expanding too much. I don't have any plans of opening secondary offices, but my plan is to get my office secretary fully paralegal certified, which she's in the process of doing, making sure that all my employees are trained to the max. And then really just ensuring that Jake and I are the best attorneys that we can be, and sort of making sure that we limit our caseload so that we're not stretching ourselves too far, and not being able to provide, the best services that we know that we can. So really, I think right now the plan is to continue just growing in terms of our skills and seeing how far that can take us, and then kind of going from there.
If you could sit down with David from January 2025, what's one thing you'd want him to know?
That it's going to be okay, and that you didn't just ruin your life. I know that my wife, she trusts me obviously, but she was quite concerned, that I was leaving, a guaranteed salaried, 401k position to go do something that had zero guarantees.
Yeah.
I know that that definitely, had an effect on me in terms of wanting to be successful. But I would just tell that person that it's going to be all right. You're a good lawyer. That's what matters, and it'll all work itself out as long as you keep doing the right thing.
Love that. And one last question for you, David. What is something you're reading right now that you're really enjoying, or something that you read perhaps recently that really had a big impact for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I recently just read The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. It's pretty
Okay.
popular. And I think that kind of changed the way that I think about my daily routines. Obviously, being an attorney, I'm very busy, I'm very stressed. And so I think the 5 a.m. Club actually has some really good insights as to how to kind of deal with that and make sure that you're, keeping up with your mental health and physical health practices, and sort of maintaining those areas as well. So definitely that was a fun read.
Great. Yeah. Well, go check out the 5 a.m. Club. We'll make sure we link that in the show notes. Well, David, it's been great having you on the show. Anything else you want to tell our audience, or you can let us know where our audience can find you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is holmeslawteam.com. That's probably the easiest place to find us, and that links to all of our websites, all of our socials. And I'm just glad to have this opportunity. So thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, David. All right. A huge thank you to David Holmes for joining us today. You can find David and his team at holmeslawteam.com. And as always, all the links, including the book he recommended, are waiting for you in the show notes. Now, here's what I love about David's story. He refused to confuse activity with progress, and he didn't borrow money to look successful. He didn't hire a big staff before the revenue was there to support it. And when the work outgrew him, he quickly put people in the right seats. That kind of disciplined, debt-free thinking is what separates firms that quietly build wealth from firms that just stay busy. And here at The Lawyer Millionaire, this is the work that we do every day, supporting solo and small firm owners and helping them think clearly about cash flow, hiring, and the long-term wealth that their firm is supposed to be building for them. We bring business advisory, tax planning, and wealth management all together under one roof in one team on a flat fee fiduciary model. So you can stop juggling separate advisors and start getting one coordinated and effective plan. And if you want to be in the room with law firm owners who are thinking this way, building real businesses, come join us inside the Lawyer Millionaire community. You'll get monthly masterclasses, a quarterly book club, and a network of peers who are walking the same road at community.lawyermillionaire.com. Well, that's it for today, my friend. And remember, if your law firm isn't building you wealth and freedom, what the hell are you doing? Can I get an amen up in here? Now, go make it happen, and I'll see you next time.